the Public Authorities (brackets Fraud, Error and Recovery) Bill. And this is a bill introduced to the UK Parliament on the 22nd of January 2025 by Liz Kendall, Labour Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. And the bill's stated aim is to, quote, make provision about the prevention of fraud against public authorities and the making of erroneous payments by public authorities, about the recovery of money paid by public authorities as a result of fraud or error and for connected purposes. But this is yet another piece of legislation designed to enable state bulk data collection surveillance of the general public, as far as I can see. And as with the Data Use and Access Bill, which Sandy will be covering a little bit later, it's not to be separated from the recent announcement, in my opinion at least, in the UK, of the building of multiple new AI data centres, because it's only with the use of AI that this huge bulk data collection becomes useful. So with us to discuss this legislation is Clare Wills-Harrison from Lawyers of Light. So Clare, welcome to the programme. And let me just begin by asking you what your thoughts are on the overreach, or does this bill overreach, in fact?
Absolutely. Does it overreach? There's an awful lot in this bill that we're not going to be able to cover today. There's expanded powers suggested for the DWP to be able to go and search premises and confiscate items. There's a crossover with what Charles has just been talking about, because there's already powers that exist that make this bill unnecessary. And really, it's just an enabling tool as far as I can see. It's bad on the face of it. There's around 7 or 8 Henry VIII clauses in that will allow for extensive amendments further down the line if this bill becomes law. So, yeah, I've really been taking a closer look at it for the last few weeks. And just to give a little bit of background to viewers, the bill in its current form will give the Secretary of State the power to issue something called eligibility verification notices, or EVNs for short, to banks and other financial institutions. Now, these notices will allow the authorities to access people's bank account data, but not because there's any suspicion of fraud. It's simply to help identify eligibility and or potential overpayments of benefits. There is absolutely no need for any criminal activity or evidence of wrongdoing before this happens. So the worrying thing about this is that all welfare claimants and, crucially, the people connected to them will have their accounts scrutinised by the government. Now, of course, banks are going to use AI to carry out these mass searches if they receive an EVN. And that means that they effectively have to process the data for every account holder at the bank, not just those receiving benefits. So it's a massive invasion of privacy for all of us, a serious risk for data breaches. And in addition, banks are actually going to charge for this processing. Now, it's unclear from the bill where these charges will be paid from, but it is clear that taxpayers will foot the bill. Now, that's either going to be from recovered funds or from the welfare or the DWP budgets. And I would just like to remind people, so that it's very clear, that when the government talk about welfare fraud and public money, they are talking about our money, the taxpayers' money. It is not their money, yet we don't get a say in how that's recovered. So, interestingly, the bill includes a clause, and I think people probably know about this already, but I'll just mention it, that it could strip drivers of their driving licences if they are convicted of benefit fraud and unable to repay the money. It's a real step too far. And obviously, there's a real danger that people could be convicted due to AI errors and lose their licence unfairly. We only have to look back at the Horizon scandal to see how it can all go so horribly wrong with machine learning and machine scraping and AI. So what I would like people to ask themselves about this bill, if they can take a look at it, and there'll be a link in the show notes, is it in fact really about fraud recovery at all? And if they read about all the issues connected with the bill and they still conclude that they think it's about fraud recovery, at what price is it going to achieve its aims? Because in a nutshell, this bill is all about the government having access to the private data contained in everyone's bank accounts by way of mass spying. So if that sounds familiar to viewers, it should. You might remember the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, and that proposed similar bank spying powers and raised widespread alarm about revealing data on people's medical conditions, movements, opinions, charitable donations, political donations. And of course, that bill fell in 2024 when Parliament was prorogued after being heavily criticised by the opposition government at the opposition at the time, the Labour Party, who are now in government. But of course, these invasive powers that we saw in that bill have now resurfaced in the Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill. So at the heart of the bill is not fraud recovery. It's a massive data grab and the installation of a surveillance state. It's allowing the government to spy on personal bank information. It's completely disproportionate. It violates the right to privacy under the Human Rights Act. And as I said, the government already have existing powers to investigate welfare fraud under the Social Security and Fraud Act. It makes this bill totally unnecessary. Now, viewers can check out an article that I did this week on my Substack for further information about this bill. I highlighted 17 points that I was concerned about. And I'd also recommend that they do go and visit Big Brother Watch, who campaigned on the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, and then have regrouped to campaign now on the Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill. And they've actually got a briefing document that comes up with 29 points about which we should all be worried. So you can join their campaign. They do have a petition. They do have a template letter to write to an MP for your MP for what it's worth. All of the links for that will be in the show notes. And obviously we need to stay informed on this particular issue and ensure that our privacy remains protected. There is a short video that I've got to show you all about what some MPs are saying about this particular bill. So take a listen, see what you think.
This is mass surveillance.
It is far too much of a snooper's charter.
These are citizens, not suspects.
These powers allow the Department for Work and Pensions to seize money directly from bank accounts without due process, suspend driving licenses and even search properties and personal devices. These are not the hallmarks of a free and democratic society, but the tools of an Orwellian surveillance state.
It is far too much of a Big Brother bill. It is far too much of a snooper's charter, and I would suggest to the Minister that they withdraw this bill. Thank you.
I'm very concerned about the sweeping powers of this bill to invade their privacy and treat them as suspects, not citizens. I'm talking about pensioners who need pension credit, people who are permanently disabled, who's entitled to employment support allowance is clear and settled. These are citizens, not suspects.
How much testing has been done of the systems they expect to use? The Horizon scandal is a very recent reminder of how computer systems don't always get it right.
When more than 200,000 people were wrongly accused and investigated for housing benefit fraud and error last June.
We should be concerned about making banks the judge, juries and executioners of social policy, particularly something as important as welfare policy.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with everything that was said there. So there are some MPs that are alive to the overreach that is contained in this bill. I am doing a follow-up article today with a breakdown of what seems to be the very limited revenue that is likely to be recouped if this bill becomes law. The figures are absolutely staggering, and I will only say you have to read it to believe it.
Claire, that is fantastic. Thank you very much for that. The subject is not so fantastic, of course. And, you know, the comment about the comparison with Horizon, I think, is absolutely valid. And we're already seeing, you know, as corporations use more AI and more sort of automated systems, we're already seeing decisions being made that are very, very hard to challenge. I mean, from a legal point of view, do you think that this is going to end up in the courts?
I'm hoping that the bill will just not come into legislation. I mean, one of the big areas that there's a massive problem with wherever AI is involved is where is the liability when there is a mistake? who does it rest with? Is it the person that created the system that's being used, that is using the system to do it? You know, who is liable? It's not, you know yourself, when there's a person involved that could be liable, then that's okay. But who is it when it's artificial intelligence? When it goes wrong, who do you sue? Where does the money come from if there's damages due?
These are all good questions. So I would say thank you very much.
We should just point out that a link to Claire's project, Legislation Watch, will go into the show notes, so you can read exactly what she's been talking about and what's going to be coming down the line from her Legislation Watch.
Yes, thank you, Claire, and thank you,